At 18, the world still felt wide and weightless to Marcus Ellison. He had just graduated from high school, a diploma pressed into his palm like a passport to a brighter future. The gym became his second home that summer, its fluorescent lights humming above rows of metal machines, the air heavy with linoleum and sweat. It was the kind of place where boys his age flexed in mirrors, where confidence was measured in pounds lifted and repetitions conquered. Marcus was tall, strong, his body carrying the promise of youth. That day, he felt a dull ache in his left shoulder, a lingering soreness he dismissed as nothing more than effort. He loaded the bar with weights heavier than yesterday, determined to outpace his own limits. His hands tightened around the cold steel. He pulled down his breath, hissing through clenched teeth. And then it happened. Not a sharp crack, not the sound of bones breaking, but a muted pop inside his body, a private rupture that only he seemed to notice. His shoulder throbbed, then quieted. He brushed it off, forced a grin at his reflection, and finished the set. Pride demanded he push through. But that night, when he peeled off his shirt in the bathroom mirror, the grin was gone. Under the pale light, he saw a small knot rising just below the skin, a tight marble beneath the surface. He touched it, curious, unsettled, convinced it would fade with rest. Everyone believes these things go away if you just give them time. Weeks passed, then months. The knot didn't leave. It grew slowly, like a shadow stretching with the sun. Marcus began sleeping more on his right side, careful not to press against it. He wore looser shirts, telling himself it was nothing. At first it didn't hurt. The real pain came later, and it wasn't from the lump itself, but from what it began to steal his certainty, his sense of belonging, the simple ease of walking into a room without explanation. By 19, the knot had swelled to the size of a golf ball. In the locker room, after a pickup basketball game, Marcus caught the glance of a teammate staring too long, eyes narrowing at the shape beneath his shoulder blade. The moment stung more than any bruise. He stopped going shirtless, stopped swimming, stopped saying yes to invitations that required anything more revealing than a hoodie. The first stranger who spoke of it was a man in line at the corner store. He tapped Marcus on the shoulder, pointed casually, and asked, "What's going on with your back?" Marcus laughed it off, muttering something about an old football injury. But in the man's eyes, Marcus saw disbelief, a flicker of suspicion that settled like dust in his memory. That was the beginning of a different kind of hurt, the wound carved not by the lump, but by the way people looked at him. The stares were never overtly cruel. Worse, they were curious. Prolonged glances whispered questions as he passed. He became an object to be interpreted, not a person to be known. That's when he reached for the gray hoodie, the one with a thick shoulder seam worn soft by constant use. Even in the Texas summer, when the heat pressed down like a weight, Marcus pulled it on. The hoodie became more than clothing. It was armor disguise, a fragile barrier against a world he could no longer trust. By 20, Marcus began to see his reflection differently. The lump was there, yes, but it was what it represented that broke him. It wasn't just a mass of tissue. It was a wall separating him from life as it once was. His confidence, his voice, his presence all muffled by that rising knot. He finally saw a doctor at 21. The clinic was small, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly overhead. Marcus sat on the paper-covered exam table, his heart hammering as if the weight of freedom could be offered in that room. The physician prodded the swelling knotted with practiced detachment and declared it a lipoma, a benign, fatty tumor. Nothing to fear. With a syringe, the doctor drained yellowish fluid into a tube, the color unsettling like lemonade concentrate. Marcus watched the fluid fill, hoping each drop carried away the burden. But the lump didn't vanish. It flattened slightly, then returned within weeks, rising again like a weed in familiar soil. This time, larger, heavier, mocking his hope. When Marcus asked if more could be done, the doctor shrugged, said it wasn't dangerous, and sent him on his way. That moment reshaped him more than the lump itself. Not his body, but his spirit faltered. He stopped believing in help, stopped believing there was a cure. The lump wasn't just part of his story, it became the stain that bled through every page. He worked odd jobs, warehouses, delivery shifts, selling used electronics online, anything that didn't demand a clean appearance. But rejection became familiar. Employers would smile at interviews until their eyes wandered until the lump betrayed him. One manager even confessed after a promising conversation, "I'm sorry. It might make customers uncomfortable." Marcus shook his hand politely, but inside his chest caved. That day, he didn't even make it to the bus stop. He sat on the curb for an hour, staring at the pavement, wondering how a human being could become invisible without disappearing. The loneliness grew in tandem with the lump. By 22, Marcus avoided hugs. He had once loved them, the warmth of arms pulling him close, but now the idea made him flinch. What if someone felt it? What if they recoiled? He learned to guard his body like a secret, even in sleep. Nights grew restless, filled with half-waking panic that someone might see him vulnerable. He began sleeping in his hoodie, even in the stifling August heat. The lump throbbed as it grew, but the sharper pain was invisible. The erosion of dignity, the slow retreat from the life he had once imagined. Dreams of college, of career, of belonging. They faded under the weight of a growth no one could name properly. By 23, Marcus had stopped trying. He no longer searched for answers online. He no longer called clinics. The lump was a roommate he hated, but could not evict. His friends drifted away, texts unanswered, invitations ignored. In their place came silence, thick and suffocating. Sometimes he stood shirtless before the mirror, pressing his fingers into the lump until it ached, half daring it to reveal its secret. But it never did. It only sat there, a parasite, not just of his body, but of his identity. The world didn't see Marcus anymore. It saw the lump, and slowly, unbearably, so did he. By the time Marcus turned 25, the lump had swollen beyond denial. No longer a discreet bulge beneath cloth, it pressed outward like a hidden shoulder he never asked for. Jobs slipped through his fingers the way water slides from cupped palms. His bank account dwindled to near nothing. Rent followed soon after. There are thresholds in life that one never imagines crossing until suddenly you find yourself on the other side. For Marcus, that threshold was the night he realized he had no home to return to. The first night on the street wasn't marked by tears as he thought it might be. Instead, it was numbness. He sat beneath the jaundiced glow of a bus stop lamp, hoodie drawn low, hands stuffed deep into pockets. Cars hissed past on slick asphalt. Pedestrians hurried by their footsteps, quick eyes darting away. The silence of the street wasn't absence of noise. It was absence of acknowledgement. That was the part that hollowed him most, how quickly he had become invisible. The bench beneath him pressed hard against his spine right where the lump protruded. Each shift of his weight was a reminder, a cruel insistence that the mass owned him. He hugged himself tighter, as if arms could shield dignity. But dignity was already gone. By the third night, Marcus had begun to map the rhythms of survival. Which benches were rarely patrolled, which alleys carried less danger, which vending machines sometimes surrendered a soda if you jiggled them just right. Hunger made him inventive, but never whole. The lump was no longer silent. It throbbed at odd hours, spreading pain down his arm, tingling into his fingertips. Some nights the ache stretched into his chest, sparking the terror of a heart failing. He would pace aimlessly, trying to walk away from the sensation, his body swaying like a ghost through the streets of Houston. In his reflection in darkened shop windows, he saw not Marcus Ellison, but a silhouette, hood pulled, shoulders hunched, eyes wary. Someone to be avoided. It wasn't cruelty that stung most, it was fear. People crossed streets to keep distance. A woman once clutched her purse tighter at the sight of him. He didn't blame her. He might have done the same had he seen himself from the outside. The hardest blow came one evening, when a young boy, no more than 6, pointed at him while tugging his mother's sleeve. "Is he a monster?" the child whispered, not quietly enough. The mother's face burned with embarrassment as she pulled the boy along, but not before Marcus caught her eyes wide, uncertain, threaded with fear. Monster. The word seared through him not as an insult, but as a confirmation of what he had begun to believe. He wasn't a man anymore, not in their eyes. He was an oddity, a living caution sign. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay on a park bench staring at the stars pricked against a vast sky and tried to remember the last time someone had touched him without recoiling. He couldn't. His body, once eager for embraces, now shrank at the thought. The hoodie had become his second skin, his last boundary against a world that recoiled at what lay beneath. Rain came days later. Houston, rain never whispers. It assaults. Within seconds, he was soaked through hoodie plastered to his skin like a soggy bandage. The lump seemed twice as heavy under the weight of water pressing into his bones, claiming dominion over his frame. He curled tighter on the bench knees, pulled to chest trembling as each drop found its way down his spine. It was in that cold, relentless storm that Marcus finally spoke words he hadn't formed in years. His lips barely moved, but his soul cried them. God, if you're real, this would be a good time. The sky offered no answer, only rain in unending sheets. Yet something shifted. Not relief, not rescue, but a fragile thread of surrender, the kind that surfaces only when everything else has been stripped away. Marcus closed his eyes, body shivering, teeth chattering. Hunger gnawed his belly. Shame gnawed deeper. He thought of the boy's voice monster echoing across his mind. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps disappearing altogether would be a kind of mercy. But morning always comes indifferent to whether you wish it or not. When Marcus opened his eyes, the world was blurry with rain and fatigue. His hoodie sagged heavy, soaked with water and years of failure. And yet, in the corner of his hearing, he caught something unexpected. Laughter. Not the mocking kind he had come to expect, but light, bubbling, innocent. The sound of a child, high-pitched and unburdened, floating down the wet sidewalk like bird song after storm. Marcus turned his head slowly, neck stiff with cold. What he saw in that instant he would carry for the rest of his life, a little girl, no more than 12, in mismatched rain boots, one pink, one yellow, clutching a bright umbrella shaped like a ladybug. Her backpack bounced as she walked, her braids swinging her cheeks round with youth. She froze when she saw him. Their eyes met. Marcus, by instinct, looked away first. Always look away first. That was the rule of survival. But the scuff of her boots drew nearer. For a moment, disbelief eclipsed despair. Someone was walking toward him. The storm had not lifted, but something else had begun to shift. The rain did not let up that morning. It came down in sheets, relentless, turning sidewalks into shallow rivers and rooftops into echo chambers of drumming water. Marcus sat hunched on the park bench, his hoodie clinging to him heavy with the storm. Each drop seemed to carry a memory of failure pressing deeper into the fabric, into his skin, into his soul. He was half asleep, half frozen. A man caught between endurance and surrender. That was when the sound reached him, a giggle light, untamed, unafraid. It floated on the storm's edge like a bird daring to sing against thunder. Marcus stirred his eyes sluggish, his neck stiff from the cold. Through the blur of rain, he saw her. She couldn't have been more than 12. Her boots, mismatched, one pink, one yellow, splashed through puddles without hesitation. A backpack, almost too large for her frame, bounced with every step. Above her head, she held a bright pink umbrella shaped like a ladybug, its spots black and cheerful against the gray morning. Her braids swung, her cheeks glowed with the kind of life that had long abandoned Marcus. Then she saw him. The giggle cut off mid-note, her boots stilled on the wet pavement. For a long second, the storm was louder than everything between them. Marcus looked away first. Always look away first. The rule of survival had been carved into him by years of shame. Never challenge their eyes, never let them linger. But the scuff of rubber against concrete told him she hadn't walked away. She was moving toward him. Each step was soft, cautious, but deliberate. The umbrella tilted until its canopy hovered above them both, the first shield Marcus had known in years. Rain pattered on its surface, a softer percussion than the storm that beat down elsewhere. "You look cold," she said. Her voice was steady, not mocking, not cruel, just observant as if she were pointing out the color of the sky. Marcus swallowed throat-raw words brittle. "I'm fine." It came out hoarse, unconvincing even to himself. "You don't look fine," she replied, tilting her head the way children do when curiosity outweighs caution. Her eyes flicked toward his shoulder. There was no flinch, no recoil, just curiosity, the kind untainted by fear. Marcus's body stiffened. He braced himself for the question he dreaded most. "What's that?" she asked, softly pointing. Then, almost immediately, she added, "If it's okay to ask." The words struck deeper than the question itself. If it's okay to ask. Respect in its purest form from someone too young to know the weight of what she was offering. No one had asked him like that in years, not directly, not gently, not as though he was still a person worth addressing. Before Marcus could respond, a new voice pierced the storm. Firm, steady, older. Chloe. The girl's head snapped toward the sound. An older woman approached her steps, careful on the wet pavement, a grocery bag in one hand, a plastic poncho draped across her shoulders. Her gray hair was pulled back into a scarf, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "I told you not to run off," she said. Her tone edged with sternness, though beneath it lay concern. "But he's cold," Chloe answered, pointing to Marcus as though he were a stray dog in need of shelter. The woman's gaze landed on him. She did not gasp. She did not recoil. She studied him with the eyes of someone who had seen too much of life to be startled easily. Not trust, not pity, but assessment. Marcus tried to stand, to appear less pathetic, but his legs betrayed him. The moment he shifted weight, his knees buckled, sending him crashing to the pavement. The world spun, rain smearing everything into streaks of gray and white. The woman moved swiftly. Her grocery bag clattered to the ground as she reached for him, one hand steadying his elbow, the other bracing his back. Her touch was firm, decisive, carrying no hesitation. "Don't move too quick," she said, her voice calmer now. "You haven't eaten, have you?" Marcus blinked, unable to muster a reply. The question was less inquiry, more declaration. She didn't wait for confirmation. "Come on, let's get you out of this rain." Pride flared inside him, feeble, but stubborn. He wanted to refuse to insist he was fine to protect the last fragments of independence he carried. But his fingers were numb, his knees weak, and this woman's voice had the kind of authority that allowed no excuses. Together, she and Chloe half carried him down the block, around a corner, and up the steps of a small brick house. The porch sagged slightly. Wind chimes tinkled in the storm's breath, and for the first time in months, Marcus crossed a threshold that was not his own. The warmth hit him like a wave. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and something fried. A couch draped with handmade covers welcomed him. A small heater hummed low, and faint gospel music drifted from a radio in the kitchen. "Sit," the woman said, gesturing toward the couch, "and take off that hoodie. You're soaked clean through." Marcus hesitated, fingers clutching the fabric like armor. She noticed. "It's all right, baby," she added gently. "Ain't nobody here to judge you." The words disarmed him. Slowly, reluctantly, he peeled off the hoodie. The fabric clung to him, then fell away, revealing the swollen mass at his shoulder. The skin stretched taut red at the edges, angry with years of neglect. Still, the woman didn't flinch. She only nodded her eyes, softening in quiet recognition. "Been carrying that long?" she asked. "Over 10 years, Marcus whispered. His voice cracked at the confession as though speaking it aloud made the burden heavier. She tisked softly, a sound equal parts disapproval and compassion. Then she turned to Chloe. "Go fetch the first aid kit and that blue blanket from my bed." The girl dashed off, boots squeaking against the floor, leaving Marcus alone with the woman. She extended her hand, steady, inviting. "Name's Evelyn Parker," she said. "You can stay here tonight. You look like you need rest more than anything." Marcus's throat tightened. Shelter had not been offered to him in months. His own name had not been spoken in days. He lowered his eyes. "Marcus," he whispered. "Marcus Ellison." "Well, Marcus Ellison," she said with a small smile. "You're safe now." That night, Marcus lay on the couch wrapped in the blue blanket Chloe had brought. It was heavier than expected, smelling faintly of lavender and cedar. The heater hummed steady. The ceiling fan turned slow above him, and the silence was not the hollow kind he knew from the streets. It was gentle, companionable, the kind of silence that lets a man breathe without fear. He didn't sleep much. His body, conditioned by months of cold concrete and restless shadows, didn't know how to rest in softness. He lay stiff, afraid that moving would break the spell. But when dawn came, it brought with it a smell that nearly undid him: pancakes. Chloe was already dressed for school, her hair tied neatly with purple ribbons. She grinned when Marcus sat up, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of delivering news. "You snore," she declared matter-of-factly, handing him a plate stacked high with pancakes. From the stove, Evelyn chuckled. "Leave the man alone, child." For the first time in years, Marcus smiled. A real one. Not the hollow courtesy of surviving an interaction, but a genuine, startled smile that rose unbidden. He ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it were the last, not just of food, but of belonging. He told himself it was temporary. A day, maybe a weekend. But each morning came with the smell of warmth on the stove, and each evening with the steady quiet of a home that expected nothing in return. Evelyn didn't press for his story. Instead, she gave him small tasks, tightening a loose hinge, patching a fence, moving boxes from the attic. Invitations to usefulness. And Marcus noticed something shifting inside him. His shoulders lowered from his ears. His eyes lifted from the ground. Some days he caught himself humming softly a forgotten melody of a man still alive. But the lump was still there. Heavy, persistent, unyielding. And Marcus knew that kindness, no matter how abundant, could not erase it. One evening, Evelyn looked up from her teacup and asked softly, "Ever thought about getting a second opinion?" Marcus paused, dish towel frozen in his hands. "I did. A few times. They just drained it. Sent me off." She set her cup down, eyes steady. "That ain't right." He shrugged a weary surrender. "I gave up on doctors. Gave up on a lot, to be honest." Evelyn held his gaze, her voice calm but unshakable. "Then maybe it's time. Someone didn't give up on you." Marcus didn't know how to answer. The words hung between them like an open door. For the first time in years, he felt the faintest stir of something dangerous, something he had learned to avoid: hope. The bus from Houston to Los Angeles took 28 hours. 28 hours of silence, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional cough from another traveler. Marcus sat pressed against the window knees, aching from the narrow seat shoulder, heavy with the weight that had defined him for more than a decade. The lump throbbed with each jolt of the bus, reminding him that he wasn't here by accident. He was here because for the first time in years, someone had told him not to give up. Evelyn had packed sandwiches and wax paper, 2 apples, and a bag of lemon drops. Chloe had slipped in a folded piece of notebook paper covered in stickers and glitter glue. Inside, she had drawn a cartoon version of Marcus in his hoodie standing tall beside a smaller version of herself holding up the bright pink umbrella. Above them, she'd written in uneven handwriting, "You got this." Marcus carried the note like a talisman. Los Angeles greeted him at dawn. The sky stretched wider, the air drier, the city louder than Houston. Each horn, each crosswalk beep felt amplified as though the city itself demanded he stay awake. He was early, too early, so he sat across the street from the clinic watching the glass doors open and close as strangers walked inside. Some limped, some leaned on loved ones, some covered parts of their bodies with scarves or hats. Each person carried their own private burden, just as he did. For the first time, Marcus realized he was not entirely alone. At 9:15, they called his name. Marcus Ellison. The syllables felt strange, spoken aloud in that clean, bright waiting room. A nurse led him down a hallway painted in earth tones into a small exam room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and paper. When Dr. Sandra Lee entered, she was exactly as she appeared in the videos Chloe had shown him, calm, composed, present. Her voice carried the steadiness of someone who had seen more than most, yet still chose kindness. She asked about his history when the lump had appeared, how it had changed, what other doctors had done. Marcus answered slowly, wary of disappointment. Finally, she asked if she could look. He removed the hoodie, the gesture still instinctive with shame. The mass on his shoulder was angry red around the edges, stretched like a fist pressing outward from beneath the skin. Dr. Lee's brow furrowed slightly. "They told you it was a lipoma?" she asked. "Yes?" Marcus whispered. Her eyes traced the faint scar where a needle had entered years before. "Lipomas don't drain," she said softly. "They're solid. If fluid came out, it wasn't a lipoma." The words landed like stones. For over a decade, Marcus had lived with a label that was wrong. She numbed the area and inserted a needle. Within seconds, thick yellow fluid filled the syringe. "You were right," she murmured. "There's a lot of fluid here. This is not a lipoma." Marcus's chest tightened. "Then what is it?" Dr. Lee didn't answer immediately. She looked at him steady, then said, "We'll need imaging, a CT scan, blood work. And we'll send this fluid to the lab. We need to know what we're dealing with before we decide how to treat it." The exam ended, but Marcus felt like the room itself was closing in. He had come expecting removal, a quick fix of freedom he had dreamed about for years. Instead, he left with something more complicated: uncertainty. That night, in the small rented room where he stayed, Marcus lay on a thin mattress staring at the ceiling. He pressed his palm against the flattened shoulder where the fluid had been drained, already feeling the pressure returning. It wasn't just his body filling again. It was grief. For years, he had believed the lie of lipoma. Now, even that fragile certainty was gone. What terrified him most was not that Dr. Lee didn't know yet, it was that maybe no one ever would. 2 days later, the call came. The CT was scheduled. "We need to see." From the inside, Dr. Lee explained. "Imagine slicing a loaf of bread piece by piece. That's how the scan works. It'll show us where the fluid comes from and where it's going." The scan room was cold. The machine metallic, the air still as a held breath. Marcus lay flat arms at his side as the table slid into the tube. The hum of the scanner filled his ears, steady, impersonal. Seconds stretched. He thought of the years he had avoided looking inward both literally and metaphorically. Now there was no escape. When it was over, he waited in a smaller room sipping water from a paper cup. His shoulder throbbed faintly, but the ache in his chest was sharper. Then Dr. Lee entered, holding the printed scans. She pulled a stool beside him, not across from him, and spread the images between them. "Okay," she said gently. "This here is the fluid pocket." She traced with her pen. Marcus leaned in, seeing the gray-white layers of himself for the first time. "And this is where it's coming from." She explained the lymphatic system, how fluid moves through the body, how it drains and recirculates. Then her pen paused on a small blocked channel near his neck. "Right here," she said. "You've got a blockage. Think of it like a kink in a garden hose. Everything behind it builds up. The fluid has nowhere else to go, so it finds a pocket here under your shoulder." Marcus exhaled, the realization spreading slow. "So that's why it keeps coming back?" She nodded. "Exactly. Your body is doing what it thinks it should, redirecting. But the blockage makes it impossible to clear properly." She looked at him directly, her tone steady but kind. "It's called a lymphangioma. Benign. Not cancer, but persistent." The word sank into him like warmth after years of cold. Benign. Not death, not curse, just a challenge. For the first time in over a decade, his pain had a name. Tears burned at the corners of his eyes. He looked away, ashamed of their sudden arrival, but Dr. Lee didn't flinch. "What now?" he asked. "We'll need a specialist," she replied. "A surgeon who can correct the blockage. It's delicate, deep near the neck, but it's fixable. Really fixable. And now that we know what it is, we can move forward." Marcus swallowed hard. Relief and fear swirled in equal measure. He wasn't condemned, but he wasn't free yet either. That night, back in his small room, Marcus pulled out Chloe's note again. The glitter had smudged from travel, but the words still shone. "You got this." For the first time, he let himself believe it might be true. And as he folded the paper carefully, he whispered into the quiet, "I'm not alone anymore." The weeks following his diagnosis passed in a blur of appointments and paperwork. For the first time in years, Marcus found himself waking each morning with purpose. Not the hollow purpose of survival, but the trembling promise of change. Dr. Lee had arranged a consultation with the surgical specialist. The lymphangioma could be removed. The weight he had carried for more than a decade might finally be lifted. Evelyn insisted on traveling with him. She packed sandwiches and wax paper again just as she had when he left for Los Angeles, and Chloe insisted on coming along too. For luck, she said, waving the pink umbrella she now carried even on cloudless days. Marcus had learned not to argue against the determination of a child. The hospital was colder than he expected. White walls stretched long antiseptic air hummed from vents, and the waiting room chairs were stiff with silence. Marcus sat with Evelyn and Chloe beside him, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He reminded himself to breathe. The surgeon explained the risks. The growth is close to your neck vessels. It's delicate work, but manageable. We'll schedule you for next week. Next week, a phrase that felt like a miracle. For years, he had lived inside a sentence with no punctuation, no end. Now he had a comma, a pause before something new. But the miracle was fragile. On the morning of his pre-surgical checkup, Marcus arrived at the hospital to find Evelyn pale, her hand resting heavily on Chloe's shoulder. The girl's smile was subdued, her eyes dimmer than usual. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked. Evelyn hesitated, then whispered, "Chloe hasn't been well. She's been coughing night sweats. I thought it was just a cold, but it hasn't gone away. The doctor wanted to run tests." Hours later, the results came. Chloe had a congenital cyst in her chest pressing against her lung. Left untreated, it could collapse the airway. The specialist's voice was gentle but firm. "She'll need surgery. Soon." Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him. Chloe, the girl who had stood in the rain with her umbrella, the girl who had reminded him of his humanity, was now facing the same knife, the same sterile rooms, the same fear. The following day, Evelyn returned from the scheduling office, her face drawn tight. They can only do one emergency slot tomorrow. One. Her eyes flicked between Marcus and Chloe, her lips trembling as she spoke the unthinkable. "It has to be one of you." Silence fell heavy. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the void. Marcus's pulse thundered in his ears. He looked at Chloe. She sat small on the chair legs, dangling, hugging the ladybug umbrella to her chest. She didn't understand the full weight of the words, not yet. But her eyes met his wide and questioning, trusting. Marcus had lived with his burden for over a decade. He had carried it through rejection, hunger storms, and silence. He had imagined freedom so vividly he could almost taste it. And yet, in that sterile waiting room, he saw freedom not as something to seize, but something to give. The decision came not as a thought, but as a certainty. "Her," Marcus whispered. His voice cracked, but did not falter. "Do hers first." Evelyn gasped, shaking her head. "Marcus, you've waited years." He raised a trembling hand. "She's 12. She has her whole life ahead. I've already lost mine once. If one of us walks out of here healed, let it be her." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, spilling before she could catch them. Chloe, sensing the gravity, though not the full meaning, crawled into Marcus's lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. The umbrella clattered to the floor, forgotten. In that embrace, Marcus felt something greater than relief, greater than sacrifice. He felt purpose. The next morning, Chloe was prepped for surgery. Marcus walked beside her gurney until the nurse stopped him at the double doors. He bent low, pressing his forehead against hers. "You're brave," he whispered. "Braver than I'll ever be." She grinned, the kind of grin only children can manage before anesthesia, unburdened by fear of mortality. "You'll be next," she said, as if declaring it into truth. Then she disappeared behind the doors. Hours stretched into eternity in the waiting room. Evelyn clutched a rosary, lips moving soundlessly. Marcus sat with his hands clasped, head bowed, replaying every moment he'd shared with Chloe, the mismatched boots, the umbrella, the pancake mornings. Each memory was a thread stitching him to hope. Finally, the surgeon emerged, mask dangling at his chin, eyes tired but bright. "It went well. She's stable. She'll recover." Relief crashed through Marcus like a wave. His body sagged, tears slipping freely now, unhidden. That night, as Chloe slept peacefully in recovery, Marcus sat by her bedside. Machines beeped steadily, the rhythm of borrowed time turned into promise. He leaned close and whispered into the dark, "You saved me once. Today, I saved you. We're even." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true, because what Chloe had given him could never be repaid. Dora. And to you, listening to this story, this moment right here is where Marcus's journey reminds us of something profound. Healing is not only about the body, but the choices we make for one another. If you've felt moved by this journey so far, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. By staying with us, you'll never miss the stories that remind us why hope still matters. The days that followed Chloe's surgery unfolded like sunlight after a storm. She woke groggy, then hungry, then smiling again, her voice weak but bright as she asked for pancakes. Evelyn laughed through her tears, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. Marcus sat quietly at her bedside, watching, guarding, letting the sound of life return to the room. He told himself he was fine waiting, that his turn could come later, that it didn't matter as long as Chloe was safe. But his shoulder throbbed heavier each day, swelling again with the stubborn fluid that refused to release him. The weight bent his spine, tugged at his breath, reminded him of the years he had carried it alone. Yet, now he wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. A week after Chloe was discharged, the call came. "There's an opening," Dr. Lee said. "We can take you tomorrow." The words echoed inside him, heavy with both dread and promise. Tomorrow. A single day stood between him and the possibility of freedom. He spent the night restless, pacing the floor, folding and unfolding the blanket Evelyn had packed him, running his fingers across Chloe's note. "You got this." Morning came too soon. Evelyn drove him to the hospital, Chloe sitting in the back seat, the pink umbrella resting across her knees, though the sky was clear. They hugged him before he was wheeled away, Evelyn's hands trembling against his, Chloe whispering, "Be brave like me." The operating theater smelled of sterile metal and sharp light. Machines hummed steadily. Voices murmured in preparation. As they fitted the mask over his face, Marcus thought of the rain-soaked bench, of the years of silence, of the night he had nearly disappeared into the dark. He thought of Chloe's umbrella above him, the first shield he had known. Then the world slipped away. Chai. When he woke, everything was different. The air felt lighter. His body, though sore and bandaged, no longer bore the crushing weight on his shoulder. For the first time in more than a decade, he moved his arm without strain. He touched the dressing, trembling as if to confirm it wasn't a dream. The mass that had defined him was gone. Dr. Lee's voice drifted through the haze. "It went well. We were able to clear the blockage. It won't come back." Tears blurred Marcus's vision. He wanted to thank her, but the words tangled in his throat. Gratitude this large was not meant for speech. It was meant for living. Ed. Recovery was not easy. Each movement sent ripples of pain across his stitches, each breath a reminder of the body relearning itself. But pain was different now. Pain was progress. Pain was proof that healing had begun. Evelyn stayed at his side, steady as ever, her hands folding blankets, her voice coaxing him to eat. Chloe perched on the edge of the bed with books and doodles, her laughter filling the sterile air with warmth. "You don't snore as loud," now she teased one morning, and he laughed, startled at the sound of his own joy. Day by day, strength returned. He walked the hallway with slow steps, then faster ones. The bandages loosened the scar, knitted the skin, healed. Each milestone felt like a victory, not just for his body, but for the years of his life that had been stolen. On the day he was discharged, the sun was setting. He stepped outside, the air cool, the sky painted in streaks of gold and lavender. Evelyn held the car door, Chloe twirled her umbrella, and Marcus stood still for a moment longer, breathing deeply. The world no longer pressed down on him. It opened before him. For years, he had been known only by the burden on his body. Now, he was something else. Not a man with a mass. Not a monster hidden under a hoodie. But Marcus Ellison, a man reborn. That evening, back at Evelyn's house, they gathered for dinner. Chloe insisted on pancakes, laughing as syrup dripped across her plate. Marcus ate slowly, savoring the sweetness, savoring the ordinary. When the meal was done, Evelyn reached across the table, her hand warm on his. "You have a second chance, Marcus. Don't waste it." He nodded, tears threatening again, but this time they did not feel heavy. They felt cleansing. He looked at Chloe, then at Evelyn, and realized something profound. He had found family in the unlikeliest of places. Not bound by blood, but by rainstorms, umbrellas, sacrifice, and love. And now, to you listening. Marcus's journey is a reminder that no matter how long we carry our burdens, there can be release. Healing may come late, but it comes. If his story has touched you, let it be a light in your own storms. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel because stories like these are bridges, and you never know when one might save you. That night, as he lay in a real bed beneath a real roof, Marcus whispered into the darkness, not as a prayer, but as a truth, "I am free." And for the first time in his life, he believed it.